G'day guys, Simon from HiveKeepers here, out in the apiary today, and I've got a few hives that are desperate to have their first spring inspection. We're probably fallen behind a little bit, but we're finally out here now, and who knows what we're going to find. I've got a couple of new guys out to play with me in the apiary too, who are just going to get a feel for it, and we'll probably have a bit of a chat about what we come across, just for the benefit, learning benefit for the guys I've got here with me, but also for you. I say it every time, but if you see something that I haven't seen or a better way to do something, get onto the comments and make sure you let me know. But we want to get into this hive and start to make it happen. So I've got Dave here smoking it just to give them a little bit of a calming influence, and we're going to get in here and see what goes on with this hive. This hive overwintered reasonably well, but I won't really know until I get in there and have a look. It's probably low 20s at the moment, but yesterday it got to mid 20s, and there was bees covering this lower half of the box, so they're clearly warm and need a bit of space. So I do have some boxes off to the side, which we might end up putting on here today, or at least reorganising the inside of this box. So my first thing here is, you can see Dave smoked it. I'm going to get him just to lift up that smoker and put a little bit underneath this lid while I just lift it up a little. Just let you just carefully put a few puffs in. And some people would let that just go for a couple of minutes, but I know I've certainly let some in from the bottom for the last few minutes, so I reckon they'll have received a bit of that. And my instruction to you, Dave, ultimately is to just quietly continue to smoke them on and off. And our first sort of appearance here is obviously a lid full of bees, and you can actually see on the down here that there's actually some old sugar that was fed to them quite some time ago. I'm really amazed that that's still there. So what I'm doing with the look with it here is I'm just going to do a quick look for the queen. A little bit hard, and I wouldn't expect to find her here, to be honest with you, but I'm doing the check because I've been fooled before. I've made that assumption before and had a mistake. There's not much going on there that I can really tell, but to better safe than sorry, I'm going to put this near the entrance so that if she was to be there, that perhaps she'll find her way back. I'm going to take this lid off. This is where we really find out what's going on, find out if there's any small hive beetle. In Australia we don't have varroa, so I didn't do any checks like that. You would probably need to do that with yours. In fact, something I haven't really mentioned, but it's something I did before the camera was on. Whenever you're doing an inspection, spend a minute or two watching what's coming in and out of your hive, how busy it is. You want to look on the ground out the front, you want to look at the entrance to see whether or not you've got chalk brood mummies or any other issue. It's just worth spending that time to see what's going on. It can give you a really good appreciation. So Dave, I don't know if you can see on here, most of these, the common bee you see here is just a worker bee, and that's a female. And every now and again you might see a bee, I've just lost sight of one, I did have one a moment ago, which has sort of a large rear end, and that's a drone. Mm-hmm. And the drone is the male, and they're only there for reproductive purposes, for no other valid reason, to be honest. Can't spot any now. We'll see plenty as the day goes on anyway. I'll make sure I point some out to you. I haven't seen any small hive beetles, so if you see any small little, 3mm across little black creature running around, let me know, because I'm curious to know what sort of infestation, if any, there might be. I usually expect some.
And the little worms as well, like the little...
Oh yeah, you've heard about them. So that's the wax moth larvae. They can be in there sometimes, or sometimes they're actually the larvae of the actual hive beetle. That smoke's going well, you'll be right. So I think the important bit is to see what's going on in here, and this might be where the camera might pick a spot where they can come up a little bit closer. And just, if you just keep it slowly wafting over. They're not aggressive, so I'm not really finding any dramas yet. Off you get. And using the tool, for those that haven't done a whole lot, it's just a gentle lever between the two frames to start with. That'll just loosen them off a little bit from each other. And then you've got this J tool, which can actually get under and between frames and lift them up. Whether you lift this one or that one, that's a personal preference. I know plenty of people that have an exact way that they like to do it, but for me it's just whatever comes first. And I can feel it's heavy, and I can see lots of capped honey.
Oh wow. Wow.
And let's see what's going on here. So that's that capped honey. And you can see on the lower portion of this frame that the honey's not quite capped. And that's just because, and it's covered in drones, you'll spot them in a second. But that's honey that's not quite ripe, they haven't quite filled the cells, and they just want to put a little bit more in there. It might need a little bit more evaporation just to finish that off. I'm just going to sit this here, and if the camera can spot all these, see these big boys? See the big rear end versus just much bigger, aren't they? They're the males, and there's quite a lot in here. And they have really large eyes on the front. There, it's taken off. They've got really large eyes, and that's so they can see the queen from a long way away when they're in the air for a mating flight. So I like to have an inspection on both sides of my frame. This is pretty much full of honey. I wouldn't be taking this to harvest yet because like at least 3/4 of it has to be covered first before I want to take it. Quick look for the queen. It's nearly 3/4 though, isn't it? Don't you reckon? It's like bordering.
Yeah, 3/4 easy.
So that's nearly ready to take. But I'm just going to put it off to the side for now. I don't think it's going to quite work how I wanted it. But what I'm going to do is this. You've probably seen these hive stands before. I'm going to leave that one there. And as I said before, you can lever these apart a little bit.
So I haven't seen a hive stand. What's a hive stand do?
This is, I should call it a frame stand. So these just sit here, and I'll demonstrate it in just a sec.
Okay.
I'm going to be able to take them out and sit them there and rest them on there. So whether you need the J hook to get under, I normally just have a feel to see whether I can lift it. This one weighs a lot less, so I don't think there's as much honey on it.
Yeah, that's like 1/4.
So there's some good things to look at here, and just be aware of what's happening in your hive. Just rest that edge down. Obviously want to be mindful of a queen. Can you see down there, there's some really elevated cells? These drones, these big boys that are getting around, that's where they come out of. The drones are in those small those enlarged cells, and they're normally only on a small section of the frames, and normally to the edge. Again, you can see some capped honey up here. I can see the occasional chalk brood mummy. Can you see? Whoa, sorry, just got me there. In here, there's a cell there. I don't think the camera will see it very easily, but there's a cell there with a white little piece in the bottom. That's just a chalk brood mummy.
Pass me your stylus, I'll point it
out. I think we've got it.
You got it? Okay.
Got it. Sorry, just head-butted you. So there's a few of those, and that doesn't surprise me. Where I've moved these hives from spring to here, there was a lot of cool, wet environment, and coming here, I think it's a lot drier, and I think we'll have many fewer instances of chalk brood as an issue. So, for those that haven't done a lot of this before, my spring check now is me looking over each frame. I'm looking for signs of pests and diseases, and just general health and well-being. This other side's a really good example. There's a lot of things good and bad to point out, and I'm happy to share my bad as much as I am the good, because that's how we learn. Is that lighting all right?
Yep.
So it's a bit of a transition thing. Out here and this is very standard, out here there's honey, capped honey. There's a little bit of honey through here that's not yet capped, but it can't be far off. What you see here, and I don't know, can you see the difference in the type of surface there to there? That's the brood, and the brood is where the young are, and you can see one just there trying to climb out for the first time. It's an adult about to emerge. You can see the little antenna. We're probably going to almost just about get that moment that they come out. It's pretty cool, isn't it? And in through this space here, I saw it on the other side. I can't see it here. There's actually honey through there. So they're desperate for space, and I can't quite see if there's eggs. Sometimes the best way to see if there's eggs in frames, I'll just do it, is just making sure there's no queen here to lift up in the middle of the air. Don't want to lose her yet. Is if I do this, and it won't really work for the camera, but I'll look in those cells and I can actually see the eggs. They're like a tiny microscopic grain of rice, and some people really worry about having to see their queen, but I know that if I see tiny little grains of rice in some of those cells, that actually means that she's in there. She's only laid in the last 2 or 3 days, those eggs, and that's perfect. So I'm just going to keep pushing along. So she's got her brood chamber, which is that area of eggs and young, right up here in the middle of the box. You can see lots of capped brood, and there's some other interesting things down the bottom there. Can you see anything different that we haven't spotted before?
Yeah, big clumps of
something.
Yeah.
I'll point those out a bit more in a minute. I just want to just stay where you are. You can have a look on that side while I just have a quick look here. I'm just doing a queen search before I try to point out too much else. The queen in here is doing a good job. I'm sure we'll find her soon. So what I want to point out here, I'm just going to re-grip this. See, there's some interesting shapes down here. They're called queen cups. I'm just going to look in there. I'm sorry, just going to change the angle for a second. They're queen cups, and that's the bees practicing to create a queen cell to rear new queens. There's nothing in there. If I saw royal jelly or an egg or something in there, I'd start to be thinking, oh, we've missed the chance, and they're going to get into that swarm instinct. But they're just practicing. I'm not too stressed about them now. Not even too stressed. I'm not going to worry about destroying them. And on this side is a really good example of, and I'm sure we'll see lots of it. Not sure what angle is going to get it the best, but if you can see in there, it might be too hard, you can see lots of larvae at different stages, like a little grub in the bottom of each of those. I don't know how easy they would be to see. And they've probably got another 5 or 6 or maybe 7 or 8 days to maturity.
Are these them feeding? What's going on with them sticking their heads in?
Yeah, so sticking their heads in, they're probably putting some royal jelly or other pollen and the like in there for feeding. This whole frame is covered, except for where you see the capped honey there. The whole frame has really obvious larvae to me. So that there's a population explosion that's going to happen soon. This is a really productive queen. She's about to, yeah, they're about to really have an increase here. So I just blow on a frame if there's a clump of bees that I want them to move along so I can see what's going on. Just moves them along a little. Just want to make sure that there's not a queen under there before I just sit here on this frame on the outside on the frame hanger. So loosen off both sides, fingers in. All the movements need to be just slow and deliberate. So that's really stuck down at the bottom there. So what I'm going to do is get some leverage under that. Well, this is getting interesting. So you can have a look on that side while I just have a look here. Seeing lots of honey on the edges. Seeing lots of capped brood on my side.
There's heaps on this side, pretty much the same on this side.
Yeah, alright, I'll do this. And I'm always having a real, like I have a quick, my first impression is what have I got here? Then my second step is to see if I can quickly spot the queen. Not all my queens are marked.
What's this part here, boss?
So let's have another look at that. Tip that up a bit. So they're more of those queen cups. Oh, you got one there?
The white thing in there, what's that?
Yep, just making sure I haven't got a queen here that damaged before I put it down a bit. So on the bottom, you often get this build up where there's a bit too much extra space, and I'm going to clean that up in a minute. But they're the queen cups I mentioned before, but that there, see how they're protruding? They're like those drone cells we saw earlier. They're in a bit of a silly, they always seem to build them on the edge, that's their standard approach. To me, that's getting in the way of practical, you know, the practical space that the bees want to work with. I'm going to clean that up a bit when I go to put all this back together shortly. I'm not going to do it just yet because I don't want to agitate them all yet. And you can see that all on that side. I reckon it's part of a product of it's a byproduct of the fact that they need more space. If they had if I'd given them more space earlier, they probably would not need to fill every little gap like that. Did I answer that sufficiently?
Gotcha. Yeah.
So again, I'm going to open this here. Squash a few is inevitable. It's easy to get wound up over that as a new beekeeper, but if you want to keep bees, you will hurt a few. and you will get stung if you want to keep bees.
What's this white stuff on the bottom?
I'm just going to change its position in a second, and I'll take a look. So another pretty standard looking frame. Looks good actually. Model Citizen. I'm looking at the pattern of the brood, and the brood is a bit hit and miss, but I think that's because, let me see. So, like another classic example of a frame, I want to show a few things here. Again, the honey around the edge, I've seen this constantly repeated. Often, there's not as much pollen in here as I thought there would be overall, but there might be some further down. Lots of larvae. This is the cap brood. Something to be aware of is, see this pattern here? Like you can see that there's quite a few uncapped. And at some point you'd start to go, well, what's going on that's causing that? In my mind here, it's probably just some old chalk brood mummies that have been dealt with given where they came from. And they've put something else in there. They've put honey in there. They've the queen's come along later to find a space, so there's a little bit of uneven development. You can also see some strange lines across here, and they've obviously chosen not to put anything in there, and that's because that's where the wire is for the frame that supports the foundation. And the foundation is that sheet of beeswax that I put there at the start before they then build their honeycomb off that. Dave, what were you pointing out?
The white stuff.
Let me just adjust this position again.
Okay.
These ones.
Yeah.
So there's two things here. That's a chalk brood mummy. So that's deceased. That's a little bit. You with your stick that you've got, can you flick that out of the hive? They're just going to take it out anyway. That there is just an uncapped brood cell, so that would have developed into a brood before I accidentally opened it up because of, well, essentially we're raiding their hive, aren't we? And this is just going to be repetitive for a bit. So what I might do is I'm just going to get cracking and keep pushing through. And now when I spot something a little bit different, I might point it out rather than go through every single frame with you guys. So I reckon I've got a fair bit of chalk brood. That's why I'm getting a bit of spottiness there. But to be honest, a lot of it's got honey in it. Yeah, there's no place for them to put their resources. They're desperate for another box. So rather than keep putting it on the hanger because I've got no space, I'm just going to shuffle these over a bit. Which I could have just removed one and then shuffled them all across a bit by bit, but I've got the hanger there which helps me. As long as the box doesn't tip over because of the weight. That is extremely heavy. I think it's just stuck on at the bottom. Bit of honey there, Dave?
Yeah.
Wow. Stand up for a sec, Dave, so I reckon it's a bit awkward sitting down, but just checking for the queen, hang on. I want you to hold this and give the people an impression of what it feels like to hold a whole frame of honey. Just hold it onto the sides there.
Yeah, this feels heavy and dense, like a. It feels like a 4-litre carton of milk or something. It's very substantial. It has real definite weight to it.
And I reckon there's a good 3 kilos of honey on that.
Like holding a heavy tile or something is what this feels like.
Can you hold up to the white? You can see though.
Below.
So I could, feasibly I could take them out now and harvest them. We'll put them in a freezer to harvest later. I don't have any other comb that I can put in there at the moment. I've just got to build some up, so that'll happen next week. Good one.
Is that common that most of the honey would be on the periphery and the brood is kept in the
Very common
core?
and completely what you would expect. Absolutely. Honey, pollen, brood is in the middle. It's just a thermodynamic thing, keep the warmth all together in the middle. So I've been talking too much and forgetting to clean my frames. Should do this just as gives less opportunity for diseases to find harbourage in there and less likelihood of them actually sticking together. I've not seen one small hive beetle, so I'm really encouraged by that. Just a bit of chalk brood, as I said, but...
And why are you throwing the scrapings in this bucket rather than just chucking them on the ground? Is that just a housekeeping thing, or is that a disease thing, or...?
Both, actually. So housekeeping is, like, I just don't want to have sticky mess all around my legs.
Yep.
So that's an important part of it. And you don't want to spread diseases from one hive to the other. And one way that you would do that is if you had lots of wax cappings and hive parts all around your apiary for bees to come and rob from each other. So I put them in here, and whilst you can't guarantee that there isn't some transfer from one to another, just purely because of the occasional bee that drifts to the wrong hive, minimisation is the best you can do.
And that swarm that we relocated the other week that did have the hive beetles.
Yep.
So obviously you'd want to quarantine that from your healthy bee population.
Yep. So they're not here. They're not at this apiary. So I've got another apiary site that I've taken that to.
Yep.
And what's great about that is they can stay there for as long as they need to. I get a couple of months to play with them and get a feel for what they're going to behave like. Learn if there's any diseases, gives time for any diseases to manifest and show. I reckon it's a really bad move and probably against the code of practice to bring bees straight back to your apiary that you've collected from others.
Yep. So they're in their quarantine location, and how long would you leave them there for, like normally?
Well,
like a season or like a week?
I reckon it takes a good 2 or 3 months to probably get a feel for what's going on and for if there's any issues. Just checking for queens before I do this. I know I checked them before, but you can always miss it.
And in terms of disease transmission, is it important to like wash these tools and wash our gloves and anything like that, or is that not really that important?
It's actually really important, but like there's a limit to what's manageable. I find, to me, depending on what I find, what I come across, like this is a healthy hive. What we're seeing here, bar a tiny bit of chalk brood, which is in background quantities in every single hive anyway. So, to me, in my own apiary, I have the same tools and same equipment going from one to the other, without being washed, without necessarily being
But you would have washed these tools if you'd used them at that other hive.
That's exactly what I did. I had to give them a good clean up, and I used some warm soapy water. I know other people even go to more of a degree than that. And I actually have some gear that I don't even cross over. Like I don't even use. I've got the hive tool that I don't even use in this apiary. Never comes here.
Yep.
And I've got some. Once I've got a box and frames in this apiary, they never go anywhere else. So that's called a barrier system.
Yep.
So this is one location, and even where I store them, I keep this apiary stuff in one spot with a separation to the my other spare gear.
And you're talking about the hive configuration in relation to like thermodynamics.
Yep.
Are you putting it back together in a certain sequence, or you can just throw it back in there any way you want and the bees will work it out?
So you can throw it back however you want and the bees will work it out, but you actually throw an element of risk into your management there. I think ideally you put them back how you found them. Like that's
what you've been doing?
That's a simplistic way of doing it. Sometimes I forget and I might have turned one and not got it back properly. You're probably going to be forgiven for that. But where I think it's most important, like you can actually deliberately put it back differently, and that is to create...
To stimulate certain types of things to happen?
You want certain actions to occur, or you want to avoid something. That's really normal. Now you've just got me confused as to which way I had this one.
That wasn't my intention.
No, I know. But I know they're at similar stages on both sides, so I'm not at all anxious.
So if I was new at this, is it worth like numbering each one of these cells? Or putting an arrow in them or something?
Each frame, you could definitely do that. I do know that and I've tried it, any system like that, you would very, very quickly find that it's not going exactly how you planned, because beekeeping is so fickle and unpredictable that you would end up changing it around a fair bit as time goes on. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
You can try to have a system, but bees don't always want to comply to your system. So it's good to be well intentioned, as long as you can also be and have systems But it's also important to be flexible and understand that you won't always be able to do it exactly how you want. Bee welfare is the first thing you want to worry about, not just your system.
And have you developed a bee hive inspection checklist so that you don't miss important parts?
I have a system. It's actually an app that helps guide people through an inspection and record that information.
So that way you don't miss important steps?
Yeah, and because I've done it a million times, I don't sit here doing a check off. But
for someone like me who's new and is bound to make mistakes,
Wow.
that'd be a way to streamline that?
I reckon that's a really good way to do it. And like I write, there's lots of information on the internet and the like as well to find out what works best for you in your area. But there's a few articles I've got on the HiveKeepers website which help address this. One in particular about exactly what we're doing, your first spring inspection, in making sure you're aware of what you're looking at. And some of those points I might not have discussed today, but my thinking would be consistent with what I'm actually doing here and what is actually written in that article.
So, and this is the start of spring, first spring inspection, and will you inspect this like every week from now, or will you not inspect it again for a year, or how frequently will you be doing this?
I don't know.
I'm sorry.
No. Like a practical working with their life cycle is probably every 7 to 10 days.
Yep.
And that might be only a quick check, like quick look in there, seeing how busy they are, take a few frames out, add a few fresh frames.
Is that related to how cramped they are? Like you said, these guys need more space, or need to do it more frequently or something? Or?
Space, just their life cycle. If they're going to swarm, you need to check about every 7 to 10 days to see if there's swarm cells developing. And they're those cups that we were talking about, those queen cups, but properly developed.
Roger.
What we're going to do next, which will lead into what you've sort of been talking about, is we need to check that bottom box. And I want to see if there's any queen cells. If there isn't, and they've only got those queen cups, I know these guys probably, well, it's so hard to say, but probably don't have a huge swarm instinct at the moment.
Yep.
They're certainly thinking about it because they're practicing the cups,
Yeah.
but they haven't developed any queen cells. If I didn't give them space now, I reckon in the next fortnight I'd have dramas. And there's nothing to say that they wouldn't already be developing that instinct now.
And when you're saying they develop that instinct and you might have dramas, is that like the swarm will pick up and relocate somewhere else?
Yeah, and like it's not really dramas because it's doing what they do naturally.
Yep.
The dramas that I'm referring to is most beekeepers aim to keep their bees in their hive, not to have them disappear and go over the neighbour's fence and find a home in their eave. But that can happen. That can happen even to good beekeepers, and like it's a timing thing. Last year I had one of my colonies swarm on me, and that was mainly because so many cold and windy days, or days that weren't suitable to get out there.
You need to set up a better place for
And
yourself.
then the occasional good day, I have a day job as well. I've got to go and work in that day job, so I couldn't be there on those days that were actually the few good days that were ideal to get into the hive. Like I wouldn't be opening this if it was sort of under 15 degrees Celsius. That's not fair. And we've got to manage that by just looking after them.
Okay.
So I'm going to lift this box off now. Just going to move that to the side again. This box is coming off. I'm going to sit it there. It's going to confuse them a little bit, but that's just convenient for now. So I'm going to need to lever in between the two. No doubt about that. Dave, what's your impression? I know you've seen a few. You've seen the odd bee or two beehives. In terms of their attitude towards us, what do you think they think about us right now?
These seem like very placid bees to me. They don't seem overly agitated.
That's heavy.
I don't feel like they're out to get us like I've seen some beehives, some bee swarms. I think the guy in the smoker's doing a great job, that sort of thing.
Very good. Touche. I reckon you're right. Like these are pretty calm. I've not had, like you would know, because they bounce off your mask, your face shield rather. If they're agitated and frustrated with you, they'd be stinging your gloves. You would know. They're pretty relaxed.
I found it really interesting that different hives and different swarms have a different personality like that. I would not have imagined that.
Yeah, it's and queen breeders breed for those traits. So productivity and
Really?
temperament. Yep.
Huh.
So you can see lots of previously squished bees. Good time to clean those up. And whilst I'm at this point here, can you just smoke the top for me a bit, please, Dave? I'm going to then clean up a bit of this mess on the top. Chuck it over if you want. Wind's just got you, didn't it? Now it's got me.
And it's changed.
There's been a lot of that as you've been doing this.
So this is the point where they'll probably get a little bit more frustrated, only because we're starting to get right into it now. And this is where you just don't want to drop a frame or...
Is there a downside to scraping the top of the frames before you pull them all out?
Well, it's actually easier because I can get to it a bit better and it's a bit more solid like this.
So do all of them first?
Yeah, but like they're in the way, so the odd one might get... It might seem a bit intrusive. Sometimes you can accidentally crush the odd one.
They should get out of the way.
Big company.
Switch on, bees. Get out of the way.
But the important thing is just to be slow and methodical. It's hard when you're pushing through something that you can't tell how hard it's going to be until you...
What are the big things you're doing differently now to when the first time you did this?
Oh, it's probably more that I've got some more confidence, and like it's a forever learning skill. And I reckon I know not much, but that's how I always feel because they keep outwitting me. But just having confidence so that I can just predict and understand, and just general knowledge, that I can predict and understand what may eventuate rather than just look at it and go, I see this. I can actually go, I see this, and I think this will happen.
Yeah.
And that's something that I think new beekeepers takes a lot of time. And in a recreational setting, when you might only have one hive or two hives, and you only look at them sort of 5 or 6 times, and you're not like a commercial beekeeper constantly looking at hives and getting that rapid
Feedback?
fast feedback and appreciation. It's just not going to, it's going to take years to get that.
And I imagine there's lots of little things that you can improve. Is there a handful of things that are really critical, and if you mess that up, it's catastrophic?
That disease protocol we were talking about before,
Yep.
like I think a barrier system is good.
So that's a really important thing to get right.
Yep, and that's something I was terrible at the start, like I did not understand. And that's the biggest risk, I think, and this is my opinion, and take it or leave it, but lots of new beekeepers getting on board with this hobby, and it comes across as something fairly easy to do, but one thing that...
Really? This strikes me as like insanely complicated.
No, you just chuck a box in your backyard with bees in it and off they go and they look after themselves.
The perception?
There is that perception, but actually there's a lot going on, and it's the disease management that probably is the biggest concern in general, and that's something that isn't cool and sexy, so people don't bother thinking about that or necessarily talking about it.
And is the flow on not just like if I have like poor management practices, this beehive gets sick and this swarm gets sick, but that other hives in the area can be really like negatively impacted?
That's exactly what happens. So just imagine I've got a diseased colony and it's weak. A weakened diseased colony which is slowly losing...
Sorry, what should I do with this?
Yeah, just throw it over here, or pass it to me. Yep, good work.
I threw it past the box just for effect.
Right. So if you imagine a weakened and diseased colony that is dwindling in numbers, it is the disease is getting worse, but there's honey and there's other resources in there, and other bees from other hives are going to go, hey, the larder's full but no one's protecting it.
Yep.
And they'll come in and they'll go and take some honey, rob honey, and then take it back to their hive. And that's very common, and that's largely why if you find pests like American foul brood, and that's a discussion probably for another day, but you need to close off those bees and shut them down straight away and then destroy them is usually the answer, especially in Australia. You need to destroy them immediately.
And how does one do that? Do you burn the whole hive, or...?
Yeah, look, there's a few options there. Some people would burn the whole hive, close the bees off and burn the hive. You need to contact, in Australia anyway, I can't speak for everywhere else, you need to contact the local primary industries department or Department of Agriculture, depending on where you're from, and they normally give you advice, and I would say that's the first port of call, but you would take them away, close them off so they can't fly in and out, you take them away and burn them. Some people actually would use some of the gear again and irradiate it. If you irradiate it, you can get rid of all the AFB spores and any of the issues that it had and make it clean.
I'm confused. Do you just wander down to the local irradiation shop, or how do you do that?
So there's not many of them. Like in New Zealand, there isn't one of those facilities at all. So if you're in New Zealand, you can't even do that. You have to burn it. If you're in Australia, I know that in Melbourne here, near where I am, there's one facility, Stereotech, that can do it.
Oh wow! Huh? I didn't know they did that.
They can do that there. It's costly, but it's not too costly to be honest. But it's there as a service that's available.
Yeah, I didn't know they did that.
What I'm going to do, I'm going to whip through this, and if there's anything really pertinent, I'll point it out.
Do you want me to shut up now?
No, you're right.
Okay.
Ask away. So we're in the zone where we might find a queen. So if you see an elongated, sometimes a bit narrower, sometimes not. Bee, that might be her.
It's only a lot busier than the
Yeah, they
top
moved
half.
around a bit quick there, didn't they, when I lifted that? So what I want to show you, only because I didn't get it on any of the other frames, Luke, is, oh, that's a perfect angle. Can you see in that way where the lights, you can see the pollen? And I don't know if you can see the huge array of colour. But that pollen, and I don't know, can you see it glistening a bit? So what they've done is they've packed pollen in there, which is what they feed the young. And then that glistening over the top is that they've put honey on top of that. And that's called bee bread. And bee bread lasts a really long time and can be a resource that they can go back to going forward. It just sort of preserves it. I'm going to use that word. I don't know if that's the best word for it, but that's what I'm going to say. So you can see how the honeycomb's really dark on this frame compared to some of the light stuff. That's just because it's been well used, and this one day will get swapped out. There's still a bit of space in this box. A few more in the air for you, Dave.
Are there times of year or weather conditions that makes them more vulnerable to parasites and infection?
So, talked about chalk brood before. That was those little mummies, yeah?
Yeah.
So, they find it really good to develop, because they're just a fungus. They find it really good to develop in warm, humid environments, or cold, wet environment, any of those, when there's excess moisture. Bees are really good at regulating temperature and to some extent humidity, but when there's too much of that, they just can't do it. You can see them fanning there, look at that.
Huh.
That's where you go. I hope the queen wasn't on there and I just threw her over there, but pretty confident she wasn't. So yeah, chalk brood in winter for me, because of my previous site, there was lots of grass around and it was cold overnight, every night, so there was that moisture in the air and humidity. Here, this time of year, small hive beetles building up just because of the life cycle. It sort of hibernates, if you want to, can't think of a better word, over winter and starts to show in summer. I know enough about American foul brood to spot it and play with it, but I don't know a huge amount of its life cycle. But I know that it certainly has, just looking, concentrating. I know that there are certain times of the year where American foul brood can become worse. Now is one of them, being the springtime. And that's probably agitated by the fact that bees are swarming at this time of year and getting out there and spreading from flower to flower. And it is known that you can spread diseases by bees just visiting the same flower. Just like I could cough on a handrail and then you touch that handrail and you get my cold. So there could be a bit of that sort of thing. And activities like pollination services, where a lot of beekeepers bring bees to a certain area, that can contribute to spreading diseases from one location to the next. Yeah, there's a bit of a frenzy going on, isn't there?
Before we were talking about the smoke management, and you said not to get too close because otherwise you cook the bees. Can you explain how the smoke calms them down? That I don't really understand that.
Sure. So they put out, do you know what? There's so many schools of thought of this going around.
Is it like it masks a pheromone or something?
You sort of lose track of really what's what, and someone can throw in their own 2 cents worth about this, I hope. And that is that it masks the attack pheromone that they can put on you if a bee stings you, and they don't smell each other's attack pheromone over the top of the smoke. That's the simple way to look at it. Just doing my queen search. Geez, it's full of pollen. I was wondering in that top box where all the pollen was. Well, it's in the bottom box.
So it's a bit like a hunter or a trapper, they might smoke their trap so that it masks the human scent on it. Is it like that?
That's that. And then the other thing is, and I'm not so sure about it, but it makes sense to me, but I'm still, the jury's out in my head. But
is that a drone?
There's Yeah, well, there's a few big drones there. They're moving quick, aren't they?
Yeah.
Probably hard to... just a sec, just want to shake that and have a quick look. Oh, there's a hive beetle. And there, the hive beetle's gone.
And do you have hive beetle traps in this box?
Not yet. I will put one in today, like the time's right. There you go, see that? I don't know, it's gone over the other side now. Little black beetle, a few millimetres across by about 5 millimetres off. There. No.
And we tried to crush those the other day, and I was amazed how resilient their shells are.
Tough, aren't they?
Yeah.
So what I'd do now is try to get him and crush him, but like that's he's off. The bees will be fairly aggressive towards that and try to remove him.
And can they kill it, or do they just grab and drag it out?
They can try to sting it and grab it and drag it out. Either one, really.
Huh.
And back to your point before about this smoke. So the other thing too that happens is you smoke it. It's a theory that makes them think that there's a bushfire in the landscape.
Yep.
And as such, they will. They can't pick up their young. They
Yep.
can't take wax with them. All they can grab is honey.
Yep.
And in grabbing that honey, like you and I after a Sunday roast, we sit there going, "Whoa, nice and full," and we can't. We're probably a bit lethargic and a bit slow, so therefore they don't have the same desire to get up and want to sting us. I'm not 100% sure of that, but like it makes sense to me, but I'm just not sure. Haven't committed to agreeing with that entirely, and my opinion's changed on that over the time. So I definitely reckon the queen. Like I'm getting that feeling she was in the upper box, and we just missed her. But time will tell.
Is that just your spidey sense, or is there a reason for that? Or?
I'm just seeing, what I'm seeing here is not any eggs. There's more space in the top.
Okay.
Just gut feel, which is, I know gut feel, like maybe you shouldn't rely on it, but...
Is this one of your queen cup things on this side?
Yeah, I was going to show you that. Good spot.
This one here?
Yep. So, can you, with the camera, get an angle in on that to see inside it from the bottom? Is there anything to see on the inside? And I
Not
think
really. It's a bit hard. Like they're sort of all over it, but there's nothing obvious in there.
No, so if you saw royal jelly, which just looks like a white creamy substance,
No.
then they're gearing up to do something with that. Again, I think that's just a practice go, and like you can pull down and destroy those, but over time I've worried about that less and less. Talk to other beekeepers and they just think you're wasting your time. Oh, there's a cracker of a one on this side, Luke. I want to show you this one just because it looks so excellent. See, close to you there. Just looks good, doesn't it?
Yeah. Got some alien structure.
They're certainly practicing.
And where you're at, like in your development now, Simon, like what's the big thing that you're focusing on improving the most at the moment? I'm sure there's lots of things you want to get better at or learn more about. What's the big thing that's like a major focus for you at the moment?
It's been a major focus for a while, and I still feel like a beginner, and I constantly feel like a beginner with this. And that is the more I understand the bee biology, the more I realise there's more I don't know, which is why I constantly feel down low. But the more I understand the bee biology, and that's through reading and talking to people and videos and what have you. The more I do that, if you understand the bee biology, you can predict and comprehend what's coming and what's going to change. And
have you had a lot of good feedback from viewer comments that have given you a lot of great insight?
I get a little bit of comments. I certainly get some that say, "Don't do that," and that's fine. I don't mind being told not what to do because I'm learning. But others give me suggestions of how they would do it, and that's good. That's why we do this. For the betterment of all. But yeah, all the comments that we get are appreciated, and we try to respond to as many as we can. There's lots of learning to be had for all. Even old guys can probably learn the occasional new thing, I'm sure. Probably some fancy quote that one of you guys know about learning, don't ever stop learning. I can't think of any right now.
And has this hive management changed a lot in recent times, or would this be familiar to someone who was managing a hive 200 years ago?
interesting you say that. So probably 200 years ago is a stretch, because 200 years ago they hadn't developed these, well, I don't think they'd quite developed yet these removable frame type hives. The removable frame is now a legal requirement in places like Australia.
Really?
It's a bit of chalk brood. And that's so that you can do what we're doing right now.
Yep.
Inspect. If they were all fixed in there, which is how a beehive would normally be, you saw that one that we pulled out of a wall the other day, that's all fixed. The only way you can, if you wanted to check for disease in that, because that was your home hive, it would be very hard to do without absolutely destroying it. So this, in the 1850s, a guy called Langstroth, and there's debate on maybe some other people had a play in on it before him, but I don't know about that. But he's like the father of modern beekeeping. And Langstroth,
Where's he from?
somewhere else, I think he's from the US, I can't remember.
Good work,
I
America.
don't remember the whole story. But he created, oh, there's the queen,
Show me.
bingo. And that's, see her down low here? She's my one marked queen.
I had a feeling she'd be in the bottom one. So I can't see it still. Can you point it out with
yeah, she's just at a spot that I feel a bit vulnerable. I just want to manage. No, you pull back the camera for a minute, because she's on the run. She's right. She's right on the end of that frame towards Luke, and she's just going under it. So I'm keeping her really close in case she drops off. So I'll show you in a minute. Once I am confident something dodgy is not going to happen. This is that pivotal moment where you don't go walking away with a frame.
You can see these ones come back. You've got a lot of pollen on these.